On the evening of June 29, 1944, inside the dimly lit confines of the Kremlin, Joseph Stalin sat motionless at the head of a long wooden table, a map of northern France stretched before him. Red pencil marks circled a single name, Caen. The city had not fallen. 3 weeks after the Allied landings in Normandy, Caen, supposed to be seized within hours, remained in German hands. To Stalin, this was not a minor delay. It was evidence of weakness, of hesitation, of something far more dangerous than battlefield friction. A coded message from Washington had arrived earlier that day. President Franklin Roosevelt sought reassurance, asking for Stalin's assessment of the Western Front. It was a careful inquiry, diplomatic in tone, but unmistakable in its concern. Stalin did not hesitate. He dictated his response with cold precision. The Red Army, he noted, had launched Operation Bagration just days earlier, an offensive involving over 2.3 million Soviet troops smashing through German Army Group Center. Entire divisions had been annihilated in a matter of days. Cities were falling. The Wehrmacht was collapsing under the sheer weight of Soviet aggression. And yet, in France, progress stalled. Stalin's words were deliberate, sharpened with purpose. He did not simply describe the situation, he judged it. The British, he implied, lacked urgency. Their commander, General Bernard Montgomery, lacked resolve. Montgomery, Stalin suggested, was not conducting a war of annihilation. He was conducting a cautious advance, methodical, deliberate, and, in Stalin's view, fundamentally flawed. He is slow, Stalin remarked, according to internal Soviet notes, too careful for the scale of this war. It was not merely criticism, it was an accusation. Stalin understood Roosevelt's position. The American president relied on British experience in European warfare. Churchill and his generals shaped the operational planning of Overlord. But now, with Caen still contested, cracks were beginning to show, and Stalin intended to widen them. He framed the delay not as a tactical difficulty, but as a symptom of British strategic culture, overly cautious, overly conservative, unwilling to risk decisive action. In contrast, the Soviet Union bled without hesitation. It advanced relentlessly, at enormous cost, but with undeniable results. The implication was clear. If victory in Europe required speed, aggression, and sacrifice, then only one ally was truly delivering it. As the message was encoded and prepared for transmission, Stalin leaned back, eyes fixed on the map. Caen was more than a city. It was leverage, a weakness in the Allied line, not of soldiers, but of trust. And once doubt entered the alliance, it would not be easily removed. In Washington, the message arrived under strict classification in the first days of July 1944. It was read not in a grand chamber, but in a quiet office, away from aides, away from generals, away from the fragile theater of Allied unity. Franklin Roosevelt understood alliances. He had spent years constructing one out of necessity, binding together nations with conflicting histories, rival ambitions, and incompatible ideologies. Publicly, the United States, Britain, and the Soviet Union stood as a single force. Privately, Roosevelt knew better. Stalin's words landed with weight. They were not emotional, they were not exaggerated. That was precisely what made them dangerous. Stalin had not raged about Caen. He had dissected it. He had compared it coldly to the Soviet advance in the East. While Anglo-American forces struggled to break out of Normandy's hedgerows, Soviet armies were advancing hundreds of miles, encircling entire German formations, reshaping the Eastern Front with ruthless efficiency. The contrast was unavoidable, and Stalin had ensured Roosevelt would see it. In London, the official narrative remained intact. Prime Minister Winston Churchill and his commanders maintained that the Normandy campaign was proceeding according to plan. The terrain was difficult, German resistance was fierce. Progress would come, but it would be measured. Montgomery himself was unwavering. He insisted that his strategy was deliberate, not hesitant. Caen, he argued, was never meant to fall immediately. It was a pivot point, a place to fix German armor, to draw in enemy divisions while the Americans prepared for a breakout further west. But this was not the version Stalin presented. To him, delays were not strategic, they were symptomatic, a failure to seize momentum, a reluctance to commit fully. In the language of Soviet warfare, it was almost incomprehensible. Reports from the front only deepened the tension. British forces had launched multiple assaults on Caen, Operations Perch, Epsom, and Charnwood, each costly, each inconclusive. Thousands of men had been lost, yet the city remained partially in German hands. Every failed push reinforced Stalin's argument. Roosevelt read the updates carefully. He did not respond immediately. That, too, was deliberate. He was caught between two realities. On one side stood Churchill, an ally bound by language, history, and shared command structures. On the other stood Stalin, whose armies were carrying the heaviest burden of the war, whose offensives were breaking the spine of Nazi Germany in the East. To question British leadership openly would fracture the alliance, but to ignore Stalin's assessments would be to dismiss the brutal arithmetic of the battlefield. And beneath it all, a quiet question began to form. Was Montgomery too cautious for the war they were fighting? Stalin had planted the seed, not with outrage, but with results, not with accusation, but with results. And in war, results were everything. The facade of unity remained intact, for now. Public statements spoke of cooperation, of shared sacrifice, of inevitable victory. But behind closed doors, something had shifted. Trust was no longer absolute. And once doubt took hold at the highest level, it did not remain contained. It spread. Slowly, quietly, irreversibly. By mid-July 1944, the battle for Caen had become more than a tactical struggle. It had become a symbol of delay, a symbol of friction, a symbol that Stalin continued to exploit with calculated precision. On July 10, Soviet diplomats in Washington began reinforcing the narrative already delivered from Moscow. Their tone was measured, but their message was unmistakable. While the Red Army advanced with relentless force, the Western Allies appeared constrained, bound by caution, slowed by indecision. Privately, Soviet communications grew sharper. One cable, circulated among senior American officials, described the Normandy front as static in comparison to the dynamic operations in the East. Another went further, questioning whether British command philosophy was suited to the scale and urgency of total war. These were not casual remarks. They were pressure points, applied deliberately, repeatedly. In London, the response was defensive, though carefully controlled. Churchill understood the stakes. He knew that perception mattered as much as progress. The alliance depended not only on victory, but on the belief in shared competence. He stood firmly behind Montgomery. The battle is unfolding as designed, Churchill insisted in private discussions. We are drawing in German strength, fixing it in place. This is not hesitation, it is orchestration. Montgomery himself was even more resolute. In his communications to Allied command, he maintained that every movement in Normandy was calculated. Caen was never the end, it was the means. By anchoring German panzer divisions around the city, he argued, the Allies were creating the conditions for a decisive American breakout to the west. But these explanations, while strategically sound, lacked immediacy. They required patience. They required faith in a longer timeline. Stalin had no patience for either. On the Eastern Front, time was measured in offensives, not explanations. Operation Bagration continued to devastate German forces. The entire corps was encircled and destroyed within days. Soviet troops advanced at a pace that redefined the scale of the war. Each success became another comparison point. Each comparison widened the divide. In Washington, Roosevelt's advisors began to voice quiet concerns. Not publicly, not formally, but the questions were there, circulating in briefings and private conversations. Why had Caen not fallen sooner? Why were British operations yielding limited gains despite heavy casualties? And, most critically, was the balance of leadership within the Allied command structure still appropriate? These were dangerous questions, not because they were disloyal, but because they threatened the delicate architecture of cooperation. Roosevelt remained outwardly composed. He continued to affirm confidence in both Churchill and Montgomery. Official statements emphasize unity, coordination, and shared purpose. But privately, he listened. Stalin had ensured that he would. The battlefield in Normandy had become a stage, but the real contest was unfolding in the minds of leaders. Perception versus intention, speed versus caution, results versus explanation. And as July wore on, the pressure intensified, because war did not wait for consensus, and neither did Stalin. By the third week of July 1944, the strain within the alliance had reached the point where silence was no longer sustainable. On July 18, under a sky lit by more than 2,000 Allied bombers, British forces launched Operation Goodwood, the largest armored offensive yet attempted in Normandy. Nearly 1,200 tanks surged east of Caen, a display of overwhelming force meant to shatter German defenses and silence any doubt about British resolve. It did not. By nightfall, the gains were limited. German lines bent, but they did not break. Hundreds of British tanks lay destroyed or disabled across the Norman plain. The offensive stalled short of its decisive objectives. Caen, though partially secured, remained a battlefield. To Stalin, this was confirmation. Within days, another message moved quietly across diplomatic channels. This time, the tone was sharper, less restrained. The British effort, Stalin suggested, demonstrated an unwillingness to exploit strength at the decisive moment. Montgomery, he implied, lacked not intelligence, but instinct. The instinct to press, to risk, to finish. It was a devastating characterization. Roosevelt now faced a narrowing path. The evidence from Normandy could not be dismissed outright. Reports from American commanders mirrored elements of Stalin's critique. Progress was slow, coordination complex, outcomes uncertain. Yet to openly challenge British leadership would fracture the alliance at its core. So Roosevelt made a decision. He did not confront Churchill. He did not rebuke Montgomery. Instead, he adjusted the balance, quietly but decisively. Greater operational weight would shift toward American command. General Omar Bradley's forces were given increasing autonomy. Planning for a breakout, what would become Operation Cobra, moved forward with urgency. Resources, air support, and strategic emphasis began to tilt westward, away from the grinding battles around Caen. It was not a rejection of Montgomery, but it was no longer full confidence. This was the irreversible moment, not marked by a public declaration, but by a subtle redistribution of trust. Roosevelt had absorbed Stalin's argument, filtered it through battlefield reality, and acted without announcing it. The alliance remained intact, but its internal equilibrium had changed. Churchill sensed it. Though never directly stated, the shift was visible in decisions, in priorities, in tone. British leadership was no longer unquestioned. It was now one component among equals, not the guiding force it had once been. Montgomery, for his part, remained steadfast. He continued to defend his strategy, insisting that attrition around Caen was necessary, that it had fixed German armor in place, enabling the very breakthrough now being prepared. In time, history would give weight to his argument, but in July 1944, perception moved faster than vindication, and Stalin had already shaped that perception. A single idea, repeated with precision, had altered the internal dynamics of the most powerful alliance in history. It could not be undone. On July 25, 1944, under a crushing aerial bombardment, American forces launched Operation Cobra. Within 48 hours, the German line west of St. Lo began to disintegrate. By the end of the week, the breakthrough was undeniable. U.S. divisions poured through the gap, advancing with a speed that had eluded the earlier battles around Caen. The war in Normandy had changed, and with it, the balance within the alliance. In Washington, the success was met with controlled optimism. Roosevelt praised the coordination of Allied forces, careful to preserve the language of unity. But privately, the lesson had already been absorbed. When momentum was required, it would increasingly come from American command. In London, the reaction was more restrained. Churchill understood the implications. The narrative of British operational leadership, carefully built over years of war, had been quietly diminished. Not publicly challenged, but no longer dominant. Montgomery's defenders pointed to the broader design. They argued that the attritional battles around Caen had achieved their purpose, that German panzer divisions had been fixed in place, unable to respond to the American breakout. Without that pressure, Cobra might have failed. It was a valid argument, but it arrived too late. Perception had already hardened into belief. In Moscow, Stalin observed the developments with satisfaction. He did not need to claim victory in words. The shift spoke for itself. The Western Allies were no longer operating under a singular British-led vision. Authority had fragmented. Influence had been redistributed. The wedge had taken hold. It was not a rupture. The alliance would endure through the defeat of Nazi Germany. Joint operations would continue. Public statements would still speak of unity, of brotherhood, of shared triumph. But beneath that surface, something permanent had changed. Trust had been recalibrated. From that point forward, American leadership would assert itself more directly in the European theater. British command, while still respected, would no longer operate with the same unquestioned authority. Every decision, every delay, every outcome would now be measured against alternatives. And Stalin, watching from the east, had achieved precisely what he intended. Not by force, not by confrontation, but by comparison. The delay at Caen had been transformed into something far greater than a tactical problem. It had become a political instrument, used to expose differences, to amplify doubt, to subtly divide two allies who could not afford division. This was the quiet reality of coalition warfare. Victory required unity, but unity was never absolute. It was negotiated, tested, manipulated. And once altered, it could not be restored to its original form. In the end, the fall of Caen mattered less than what it revealed. An alliance held together by necessity, but reshaped by suspicion. A moment where trust shifted, silently but decisively. And in that shift, the foundations of the post-war world were already being laid.